Blog Talk Radio.
Franchise interviews from Easton, Pennsylvania to Sydney, Australia. You're listening to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews. Welcome to Franchise Interviews, an up-close, behind-the-scenes look at franchising and entrepreneurship. Listen to interviews with franchisers, franchisees, franchise authors, franchise experts, and attorneys. And now, welcome your host, Marty McDermott, and Franchise Interviews.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of Franchise Interviews, where for over 15 years now, we've been asking the entrepreneurs who own one. I'm your host, Marty McDermott. I'm the president of Franchise Interviews, and we have a great show today. Well, many years ago, we started a spin-off podcast of Franchise Interviews called Great Quotes in Franchising. And Great Quotes in Franchising features some great quotes and aha moments from our show. We start today's show with our latest great quote in franchising, which comes from Alex Wilkes of Pearle Vision. And Alex discusses why being proud of the brand name is so important when choosing a franchise opportunity. And following that, we're going to play our interview with Scott Barnett, author of Gumption, taking Bubba Gump from movie to restaurant. That's coming right up on Franchise Interviews. So stick around because we have a great show.
Franchise Teacher.
Would you like to know how to franchise your concept or grow your franchise business?
Meet the experts at Franchise Teacher.
The goal of Franchise Teacher is to teach, coach, consult, and advise. The team of experts at Franchise Teacher will evaluate your business model and present you with a winning business strategy.
Franchise Teacher will help you decide whether or not your concept works and if it's franchisable. Franchise Teacher is proud to have over 30 years of experience in franchising as both franchisees and franchisors.
Franchise Teacher are developers of over a dozen franchise systems, which include brick and mortar as well as home-based concepts of nearly 3,000 combined franchise locations.
Whether you need to add more units or get more customers, Franchise Teacher can help. We will teach.
Franchise Teacher will help you learn our proven system.
Coach.
Franchise Teacher will help you provide a game plan to succeed.
Consult.
Franchise Teacher will make sure you stay on track.
And advise.
Franchise Teacher will help you learn from our over 30 years of experience in franchising as both franchisees and franchisors. Take advantage of our free, no-obligation phone consultation. Simply go to franchiseteacher.com or call us at 561-385-3032.
That's franchiseteacher.com or call us at 561-385-3032.
Hi, this is Connie McDermott, Administrative Assistant for Franchise Interviews, LLC, and you're listening to Franchise Interviews.
Hi, everyone. This is Marty McDermott, the president of Franchise Interviews, and welcome to another edition of Great Quotes in Franchising. Each podcast you get to hear a great quote in franchising. You know, we've been hosting Franchise Interviews many years now. During that time, we've had some incredible quotes in the show. Today's great quote in franchising comes from Alex Wilkes of Pearle Vision. Alex talks about the significance of being proud when you own a franchise, and I'll let Alex explain why.
From everything you've learned up to this point, what advice would you give to our listeners in their quest to buy your franchise?
You know, I think find one first and foremost that matches your personality and your and your desires. Find one that aligns to what you want to do from a community perspective. I think, you know, think about it as you would think about even you know, any other type of job, which is, are you going to find personal gratification out of the category? Does it really inspire you? I think it's more of find your right emotional match versus, you know, potentially, you know, start there would be my match. I think about it like, you know, I've been a corporate guy. I've worked in management consulting. I've, worked at, Luxottica going on 10 years now. Mm-hmm. And my first criteria, always thinking about, would I take a different position is it a category? Is it a brand that I can get excited about, and do I personally identify with? This is a bit of an abstract, but I always think about, would I be proud to wear this shirt when I'm going to the gym or when I'm, running out with my kids? Would I be proud to have that brand on the shirt that I have on my back as I'm out in the community? And to me, that's always been my first filter. I'd encourage potential franchisees to think about it in the same way. Are you affiliating with a brand that you are deeply proud of and that you are aligned with the mission and vision of the enterprise?
I love that response, Alex. I've been doing the show, as I mentioned, 13 years now. I haven't heard that response, but it makes so much sense, doesn't it? You want to be proud of that brand, don't you? And I think that's so powerful. I think.
If you'd like to hear that whole interview with Alex Wilkes of Pearle Vision, all you have to do is go to franchiseinterviews.com, go to our franchise interviews by category page, and then go to the health category. And lastly, we'd like to thank everyone for making this Great Quotes in Franchising podcast such a big hit. And we'll see you again soon with another edition of Great Quotes in Franchising for Franchise Interviews. Take care.
Blog Talk Radio. Blog Talk Radio.
Franchise Interviews. From Easton, Pennsylvania to Sydney, Australia, you're listening to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews. Welcome to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews has been giving an up-close, behind-the-scenes look at franchising and entrepreneurship. Listen to interviews with franchisers, franchisees, franchise authors, franchise experts, and attorneys. And now, welcome your host, Marty McDermott, and Franchise Interviews.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to a very special edition of Franchise Interviews. We're president of Franchise Interviews, and we have a great show. We're meeting with Scott Barnett, author of Gumption, taking Bubba Gump Shrimp from movie to restaurant. And we're going to talk to Scott about that in just a moment on Franchise Interviews. So stick around because we got a great show.
Are you one of those special people who are willing to go after your dreams and goals? Are you ready to fulfill that dream of owning your own business with the security of a proven brand? The opportunity to take control of your future and own a Rita's Italian Ice franchise is within your reach.
Rita's is seeking success-oriented individuals who are ready to make a change in their life, and Rita's offers unparalleled training and support to assure your success. And did you know the frozen treat industry is a recession-proof industry, and there are Rita's in 23 states currently with 540 stores open. Rita's Italian Ice has been around for 25 years and is listed as a top-performing franchise by the Wall Street Journal.
Now here's the really good part. Rita's Italian Ice is a unique and amazing taste treat. It's smoother than a snow cone, and it combines ice with real fresh fruit. The real fruit adds dramatically to the taste, and it comes in over 40 flavors. The ice and fruit are mixed on site and made fresh daily, and it is delicious.
You'll want to know more about this exciting and successful franchise opportunity. Go to www.ownaritas.com and get all your questions answered. That's www.ownaritas.com to take control of your dreams and future today. You don't want to wait any longer to be a part of this adventure. www.ownaritas.com.
Franchise Interviews. From Easton, Pennsylvania to Sydney, Australia, you're listening to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to a very special edition of Franchise Interviews, where for Overman, I'm the president of Franchise Interviews, and as we were saying earlier, we have a great show today. We're meeting with Scott Barnett, author of Gumption, taking Bubba Gump from movie to restaurant. Hey, Scott, how you doing? Welcome to the show.
Doing well. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Scott. Congratulations on the book, by the way. It's I have a chance to. I'm a professor for Kaplan University, so I have the opportunity of reading a lot of different business books, and this one is on my books to recommend to my students and friends. So it really is fantastic.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
I love the movie Forrest Gump, Scott. I think, I think I'm one of those people who identified with Bubba's character for my love of shrimp, and I got the chance of working in the seafood industry for several years. Why did you think the creation of an entertainment restaurant based on a single movie like Forrest Gump could be successful?
At first I wasn't sure, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
We really weren't we really weren't certain that this could work. What really caused me to think to change my mind was that when I really screened the movie and looked at it, and I realized that Zemeckis, who was the creator and
right.
producer and director, was really bottling magic in a certain way. And then as we looked at the research that came out of it, what we learned was there was an unforced translation from a movie to a restaurant, and it really made sense that such a thing would exist. So on the basis of that, and of course the needs of the company, that's why we went ahead and did it.
That's fantastic. We're speaking with Scott Barnett, author of Gumption, taking Bubba Gump from movie to restaurant. And Scott, what prompted you to work in the restaurant industry? It seems like there's something that you like about that particular industry.
It was really by chance. I was working in a gas station in Palm Desert, California, and I was saving up money for college, and I ended up borrowing a friend's motorcycle and put it down on a gravelly curve and broke my ankle and tore up my hands. I couldn't work, and so I had to put college off. And when I was able to work again, I started as a valet parking attendant at a restaurant. And one day, a hostess came out and said, "Hey, you're going to bus tables tonight," and I did. And the hours just sort of flew by. The work was hard, but it was a lot of fun. And
right.
And I felt like we were putting on nightly theater every night, and we were doing it better than anybody else in town. So out of that came this kind of desire to continue doing it. So when I did go on to college, which I eventually did, I kept working as a cook and bartender and so on, and it just got in my blood, I guess.
It sounded like it was your destiny, from a young age. And it sounded like those, in reading the book too, Scott, that, those owners of that particular restaurant that you were working for, they had a big impact on your life as well, didn't they?
They did. The whole thing was that they treated it as kind of an amalgamation of family and business, and it was really unique. And I thought, this is something I really like doing. And when I worked before, it was you always referred to your boss as Mr. Johnson or Mr. Anderson, and this guy was just Lyman, and it was really a very different and really kind of fun way of looking at your professional life, if you will, and that's really what it was.
That's fantastic. For our listeners, Scott, who may have never been in a Bubba Gump Shrimp Company restaurant, what makes Bubba Gump so different from some other like entertainment restaurants like Planet Hollywood or Hard Rock Cafe?
Well, we in the end, the restaurant business is really about some very basic things. It's about hot food hot, cold food cold, service with a smile in pleasant, clean, interesting surroundings, and so on. What I think makes Bubba Gump different is that we had come from a background. We had actually been running a company called Rusty Pelican Restaurants, which was an upscale seafood dinner house. And so when we came into this so-called entertainment, which is a kind of a mix of entertainment and restaurants, we brought with us kind of a stronger and I think better quality filters in terms of the food product and the service and what have you. So when we did Bubba Gump, we actually wanted to make it a restaurant. And a lot of these people who get into that business from the entertainment side, they think they're in the trademark business, or they think they're in something else. And the reality is, you're in the restaurant business. And so that's how we looked at it, and I think it made us pretty different from a lot of our competition.
Why is the restaurant business so difficult, Scott?
I think people make it difficult for one thing, but something else really is that the restaurant business it's very capital intensive. It's very meaning you need some money to do it. And if you miss somewhere on the life cycle curve, and you're putting something out there that people just don't want, I don't care how good you are, you're just not going to make it, because you've got to listen to the customer. They're the ultimate arbiter, and they decide what is desirable and what is not. And there's a very high failure rate, as you know. And I think most of it has to do with being undercapitalized, not being in the right location, or just not giving people what they want when they want it.
Yeah, I think that's well said. We're speaking with Scott Barnett, author of Gumption, Taking Bubba Gump Shrimp from Movie to Restaurant. And Scott, whose idea was it to include a retail store that sold Forrest Gump merchandise right inside the restaurant? It was very clever. Was the retail store your biggest surprise?
Yes, it was. We all knew we were going to do a retail store. We just did. Right. I think that everybody, because the hats and T-shirts had been a huge part of Forrest Gump, in terms of the movie, and they had, believe it or not, I mean, Paramount was shocked at the amount of hats and T-shirts they sold, and so. When they did, we thought, well, we'll do that, but we're not going to do it halfway. We'll actually do a real store, unlike say Planet Hollywood, which had or Hard Rock Cafe, which had just a counter which you walked up to, and there were T-shirts on the wall, and you sort of picked one out and bought it. And so it was a huge surprise to us, and a happy one. But in the end, we knew we weren't going to be a retail store. We were going to be a restaurant that contained a retail store, and so it worked really well for us. We did about 15% of our sales, and it grew into it really grew into a $30 million business. But that's incredible. In the end, I mean, you still have to be a restaurant.
That's fantastic. I mean, there was a lot of innovative things that went on. The hiring of a Forrest Gump impersonator to be present at restaurant openings. I mean, that was another great example, and I saw that on the internet. How successful was that?
That was really something. I was standing outside working on the sign at the first Bubba Gump in Monterey, California, and we were as a guy kind of walked by out of the corner of my eye, and he was in white. I thought, that guy looks like Forrest Gump. Right. He goes into the restaurant and talks to my director of marketing, Kathy Peterson, and she comes out and she goes, "Hey, you got to come in here and see this guy." And I did, and it turned out he was dressed in the same suit that Forrest was in the movie, and he had a checkered shirt with a suitcase, and he was in Nike sneakers, and the guy looked a lot like Tom.
Oh my God!
And he'd gotten his haircut like Forrest, and so I said, "Well, we'll hire him for the opening, and it'll be a novelty." Well, we ended up keeping him for a long time, and he must be the most photographed guy in America.
I thought it was Tom Hanks. Yeah, when I saw it too, Scott. I mean, I thought it was. I mean, he looked just like Forrest Gump, the character. I mean, it was identical. I mean, it really was very clever, so I thought that was great. I was mentioning to you, Scott, I teach for a university, and I teach marketing, and restaurants are essentially a marketing business. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the 4 Ps of marketing and how a new graduate can really understand the mindset of a restaurant CEO.
Sure. I mean, the 4 Ps of marketing, as you know, if you're instructing in a university or college, is that it's for price, promotion, place, and product. And and I always kind of viewed my approach to the business that way. I think that in terms of Bubba Gump, we really looked at that and kind of devised a marketing strategy out of that. And then, looked at it from the standpoint of our strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and so on, just as you would any strategic plan or business plan. And then we developed our marketing plan around that. In terms of pricing and product and promotion and all that, we really looked at Bubba Gump, and we did a lot of market research around it after we had gotten it open. We didn't do market research beforehand because there was nothing to do research about. But
right.
Once we did, we spent an inordinate amount of time doing research at every opening, both quantitative and qualitative. So we would do quantitative research like what we call nose counting, where we'd put a questionnaire in front of 300, 400, or 500 people, and then get a statistically significant response. Right. And things like what you liked about it, what you didn't like, and so on. And then we did focus groups, a number of them over the years, where we would talk about what the impressions were and get an idea of what the overall general feeling was about the company. In terms of the menu itself, the product, and so on. And by the way, we view the product as not just the food. We also viewed it as the overall experience, the tenor of the service, how people viewed the ambiance and the atmosphere. And in the end, what we were trying to create was what I'll call an emotional souvenir that people could take with them and do what is most important in the restaurant business, which is create a memorable experience that they're not only seeing, but they're part of. And so that's part of the engagement that we tried to do, was to get people to be a part of the experience as much as they were to quote experience it, unquote. And that was really, I think, where the product that we created was kind of unique.
That's fantastic. I have my marketing students listen to that clip. I think what you just said there is fantastic. Well, speaking of location, we're talking about the marketing mix, Scott. You did some interesting things with the locations. You looked at poor performing restaurants that were in great locations. What were some of the biggest location challenges that you experienced?
I suppose one of the things that people do is they say, oh, well, I'm going to locate on the pier, or I'm going to locate in this place, and that'll solve the problem. And really, it's not. You have to. It's a little bit like putting some attention to detail so that you get the whole. You don't just go 9 yards and miss the first down. I guess the biggest challenge we ever had on a great location that was really not doing well was San Francisco at Pier 39, where they were at the end of the pier, had a great view of all three bridges, the Golden Gate, the Bay Bridge, and so on, and yet you couldn't find the place. So we were able to negotiate a deal where where we put a sign, huge sign, giant sign at the base of the pier, and saying, we're here at the end of the pier. And then second, it was on the second floor, which is typically the kiss of death for restaurant locations, but we got the landlord to put an escalator up with our treatment on it. And then finally, it was sort of what I'll call on the perimeter of the pier. So we projected our presence into the center of the pier by leasing the space in front of us and then cladding it with our treatment. So we were able to take a restaurant that had barely done $2 million and turn it into a $12 million restaurant with our name and so on. So there's things you have to do. You can't just say, well, I'm going to be here on the beach and think that's going to do it. You got to do a lot of other stuff.
You have so much experience in the restaurant industry. It's interesting because all that experience, I don't know if it prepared you for, what was it like dealing with Paramount Studios, Scott? That had to be something new for you.
I likened dealing with Paramount as to dealing with armed preschoolers. You have to be really careful. And we... But in the end, they're very tough negotiators. They're very, they contrary to what everybody may think, the Paramount, the movie business likes money, and they get after it pretty hard. Wow. But in the end, I have to say this about the people at Paramount. They took a risk with us because, we were a company that had been in Chapter 11 because when I took over Rusty Pelican, it was technically insolvent, so we had to reorganize it. And they went with us over, groups like Darden or Brinker and so on, which much bigger companies, because our vision was consistent with theirs, and they took a chance. The mantra in Hollywood is don't do anything that'll get you fired, and they took a risk with us, which was we were fine with. So in the end, we got the deal done.
That's interesting, yeah, and I know you talk about in the book. In going international, you decided to use franchising as an alternative to expand, Scott. Why franchising, and what was that experience like for you? The reason for franchising, we didn't franchise domestically and don't, and so they still don't. Although we sold the company in 2011, but they don't franchise domestically now. But internationally, it makes total sense to do that or license it, one or the other, because there are so many different countries and so many different ways of doing business, and there are rules and laws and regulations that it would be very presumptuous for someone to think that they could operate a business in any overseas market. Now, we did operate a business overseas in Hong Kong. We joint ventured that deal. And we were the operating group that did it. On the other hand, we'd also joint ventured in Mexico, and we would never presume to try to operate in Mexico. Our partner was an experienced restaurant guy, and his team operates the restaurant, and rightfully so. So I think you just have to match your needs and wants with what the market will bear at the particular location that you're doing it. We looked at the whole world. We hired a company called Cindy Little. Jim Little was the guy we used, and he did a study of the whole world and said, okay, this would be franchise, this would be don't go there, and this would be joint venture territory. So that's how we kind of viewed it. I remember, I think you mentioned in the book too, it was some difficult experiences. Was it in Manila, Scott? I mean, you talk a little bit about that. What happened? If you could talk a little bit about what happened there, I thought that was interesting.
Well, in the book Gumption, I talk about Manila as being where we first got a spanking, is the way I describe it. Because we got involved with a group who were essentially swindlers, and they had developed kind of a network of people within the Philippines, and we signed up with them. They were one of the first franchisees we were with, and they ended up with money trouble, as you would expect, and they were looting the company as well as looting some other companies. And over a period of time, we got more and more dissatisfied with them. And I went over and said, "Look, I want to be paid. Number one, I want this to happen, that to happen, and so on." And they abandoned the restaurant on Christmas, just before Christmas, and I ended up getting a phone call and I had to fly over there and take over and operate myself the restaurant, because our VP of franchise had some personal issues he was dealing with, and it was my deal. So I ended up on New Year's Eve in Manila, sitting at the Peninsula Hotel, trying to and you couldn't go outside because and I think the chapter title is "Raining Bullets in Manila." You couldn't go outside on New Year's Eve because they fire their guns in the air and the bullets come back down, and I guess there's thousands of bullets flying back to the ground. You can't go outside. So pretty funny.
And that's what I love about the book, is your sharing of all these different experiences, the ups, the downs, and, everything in between. I thought it was fantastic. A lot of our listeners that listen to Franchise Interviews, Scott, we call them, a lot of them are aspiring restaurateurs. I mean, they want to, own their own, franchise or a restaurant. What lessons can you pass along to them in their quest?
Well, I would say this, that in there's a chapter in the book called CEO Lessons that I talk about where in the book Gumption, where I talk about what I learned and what I think are important things to remember. But one of the things is keep it simple, stupid is a principle that I learned from the founder of Rusty Pelican, Pete Syracuse, a really smart restaurateur and entrepreneur. And he was always saying, but don't overcomplicate it. Keep it simple, stupid. And if you're going to be in the franchise business, it should be something that is what I use, and I don't know if the word even exists, but I call it franchisable, meaning that that it can be replicated and duplicated. And in the restaurant business, that's a very big, important part of the whole thing. Are there standard ways of doing things that are really, really standard and really replicatable? So keep it simple. And I think the other thing is follow your passion. If you're really, and I know this sounds trite and you hear it from a lot of successful people, but it's true. It is, if you follow your passion and you're not, you're not undercapitalized and all the rest of the things, then you will be successful because unless you're completely incompetent. But I mean, it's really the key to success in any business, but particularly in restaurants.
That's fantastic. What was the process of writing this book, Scott? I mean, how did you go about it? I mean, one of my dreams is to write a book one day. How did you go about writing this book? I mean, did you just sit down? I mean, there's so much in there. I was trying to picture the way you went about writing it.
It's the genesis of the book was that I was at the University of Arizona speaking with Len Jessup, who was then the dean of the business school. Now he's president of the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And he encouraged me to write a case study for the grad students at Eller School of Business at U of A. And so I started writing it, and I got 10,000 words into it, and I still hadn't opened a restaurant. He was looking at it and saying, you should turn this into a book. And I thought, well, you know what, I can, and I did. And so the process really went like this. I would get up in the morning, write 1,500 to 2,000 words, and then put it away. And then in the afternoon, I'd go back to it and look at it and change it around and what have you. And then the next day, look at it again, and if I liked it, great. And then write another 1,500 to 2,000 words. And that was how the book got written. And it was really, the words didn't flow out, I guess, but they were certainly not, it certainly was not a difficult process for me.
That's fantastic. I mean, do you have other books in the work now, Scott? I mean, now that, this book is getting so much attention.
Yeah, I think there's a possibility of another book. It's not about Bubba Gump, but it's about something else. And I'm considering it. I know the work involved. So
sure, of course,
and I have a consulting and practice and a speaking practice and so on, and I have some other businesses with which I'm involved. But I think there's a possibility of another book. Sure.
That's fantastic. What's the best way that our listeners can buy the book, Scott? Are there any websites that they go to? Can they go directly to your website, or they go to Amazon? What's the best way to get the book?
Yeah, I think the best thing is you can go to Indie Books or Amazon.com, or of course, almost all Barnes and Nobles are carrying the book, and of course you can get it in an e-version online at Nook or iBooks or what have you.
Well, it was a privilege for me to finally get to speak to you, Scott. I think the book is fantastic, and I'm recommending it to all my students and friends and family. So you did a great job with the book. So I'd like to definitely have you back on the show again in the future. I'm a fan.
I'm happy to do it. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks so much, Scott. We'll be right back with more franchise interviews.
Franchise interviews. From Easton, Pennsylvania to Sydney, Australia, you're listening to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews. Franchisers, are you looking to reach aspiring entrepreneurs looking to buy a franchise? Are you looking to reach a highly educated audience on franchising? For over 8 years, Franchise Interviews has been giving an up-close, behind-the-scenes look at franchising and entrepreneurship through our website, franchiseinterviews.com, where you can hear and read interviews as well as get tips from some of the most successful sources in franchising. Our weekly franchise radio show, where each week you get to hear a new interview with franchisers, franchisees, franchise authors, franchise experts, and attorneys, and our podcast, Great Quotes in Franchising. For more information, go to franchiseinterviews.com or call us at 610-905-2919. That's 610-905-2919.
Hi everyone, this is Marty McDermott from Franchise Interviews, and welcome to another edition of Great Quotes in Franchising, where each podcast you get to hear a great quote in franchising. You know, we've been hosting franchise interviews now over 8 years and over 400 shows, and during that time we've had some incredible quotes on our show. Today you're going to get to hear from Chris Simic, who is the founder of FranchiseTeacher.com, and Chris has over 30 years of business and franchise experience as an independent business owner, a franchisee, and a franchisor. And Chris said something very profound that we haven't heard on our show in over 8 years. He mentioned that you have to almost work harder to fail at franchising than to succeed in franchising, and he explains why.
Most people, about 90% I think I've seen, buy a business other than they first looked at.
Wow, that's amazing.
So
it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, that's a big number too, isn't it, Chris? Most people, they go in with these certain expectations and they come out with something different, and I find that fascinating.
I absolutely, it never ceases to astound me, but I think that speaks to the value of franchising as a business model and a business method, because people don't have to be in something just because they know it. And quite candidly, sometimes getting involved in a business that you would rather do, that you were not involved in, allows you the luxury of taking a new career path and to develop something you never would have had the opportunity to had it not been, systematized and prioritized for you. In franchising, it's said that you have to really almost work harder to fail than to succeed, because if you have a good franchise system, if you follow directions, you have to almost purposely not follow them to not do well.
That's true. That's fantastic. We have this great quotes in franchising. I think we're going to put that one in there, Chris. I think that's very original, and it's very true. What advice would you give to our listeners? We find that most of them, they're just beginning their search to buy a franchise, Chris, and we find that, most of them just simply, they don't even know where to begin, like you were saying. What advice would you give to them?
I do, when I speak to people looking at franchise, I give them three different pieces of advice. One, make sure you're looking for business for the right reason. A lot of people have things happen in their life. They lose a job or something happens, and they react and maybe say, well, okay, maybe I'll go buy a business. That may not be the reason to do it versus having the luxurious selectivity that here's my opportunity that was created by some adversity. Second thing is that they have to make sure that they are able to be franchisees, that not everybody is designed to be able to follow the systems, procedures, and the processes it takes to be a successful franchise owner. And then I tell them quite candidly is pick a couple of the industries and the price ranges that may have interest to you, and then kind of pin down from there, either using the resources of a consultant or a broker or a team member, or on their own. Either way, but I think that if they take their time, follow the steps, and do it for the right reasons, they'll be on a much smoother pathway to success in owning their own business.
That's well said. What's in the future then for Franchise Teacher, Chris? I mean, where do you see the company 3 to 5 years down the road?
Well, Marty, we've been extremely fortunate and blessed that the business has been around, through Century Franchise Group for many years. And our new FranchiseTeacher.com has taken off. We're representing right now, 7 plus brands. I think in 5 years, our focus will really be even more fine-tuned as the consumer or the prospective business owner is looking for more and more specific information. Breaking down to teach, coach, consult, and advise, I think will be a way for us to assist people in what they need. People, again, don't know what they don't know, but I think information overload sometimes discourages people too early. They say, this is too much for me to process. But we can break it down into bite-sized pieces. I think more and more people, especially the younger generation, who are looking for the advice and the information they want when they want it, I think is going to do nothing more than continue. Then our next business venture, which launches at the end of this year, is looking to capture all the different franchise brands around the world and put them into one place. So we're looking forward to a future. And franchising is going nowhere but growing. As you said for a long time too, the number of franchise opportunities, and the world's getting to be a smaller place. I think you're going to find a lot of opportunities coming in and going out of different marketplaces in different countries accessible to more people.
That's fantastic. What's the best way, Chris, for our listeners to get more information on franchiseteacher.com? Obviously, franchiseteacher.com, but any numbers you'd like them to call or email addresses?
Well, actually, we appreciate www.franchiseteacher.com. And my business partner, Dave, and I offer them the free 1-hour consultation. Fill out the form and take advantage of it.
That's fantastic. I want to thank you again, Chris, for finally coming on the show. I've been following your career for a long time now, and I have just been very impressed with everything that you've done, So when I saw this, I mentioned to you, we don't typically call people to come on the show, but I had to have you specifically on the show. So it was an honor and a privilege to have you on the show today.
Marty, ditto, and again, congratulations on your PhD doctorate. I have read your thesis, and I would recommend it reading if people can get through
that's fantastic.
the information.
I really appreciate that you read it, too, because that's an honor coming from you, so that's fantastic. Well, I want to thank you again, Chris.
Thank
you. We'll be right back with more franchise interviews.